Hello, everyone. We're back with another episode of the Critical Fools podcast. This is episode 25. This week, we're reviewing a 2013 film, Coherence, which is directed by James Ward. I still have trouble saying his name. Excuse me if I mispronounce it, but I believe it's Burkitt. And this is a cult classic film that was made on a $50,000 budget. This film was most similar to another cult classic film that we actually started off this podcast with, which was the 2004 film Primer that had an even smaller budget. I believe that film was recorded on $8,000. So this is a pretty unique film. We tend to try to review certain films that are a little more non-mainstream at times, just to try to give some exposure to other really interesting art that's out there and that's being done on the more independent scene. So this was the first film that was directed by James Ward, and interestingly, even though this film came out 7 years ago and was received by a lot of critical acclaim, this is so far his only film that he's directed. I've read on different boards that he is currently working on another project that should be released in about a year or two, but we'll see if that actually happens. But needless to say, this is a very interesting film that I think we were both pretty excited to talk about. So just as a little synopsis, there's quite a bit to discuss, and it's a little disorienting with some of the storyline, which is purposely done. But this is like sort of a surreal psychological thriller that is has a very unique plot line where essentially the plot line is very simple enough. There's just 8 friends that essentially meet at dinner when a comet is passing, and this comet supposedly is coming very close to the atmosphere. And because of that, it leads to a bit of sort of reality bending, where you're essentially the presence of the comet decouples time, and so it leads to time incoherence, and so you have all these multiple realities of themselves. So this whole universe that they're in, it's part of the multiverse, where as this comet passes, all of the different realities can sort of interact with one another, and it gets very confusing. And you don't quite find this on until later on, that they are sort of separated, and until the comet completely passes, that they are stuck in this sort of weird time-bending universe. And so it leads to them being confused because they can't tell if the people that they're actually interacting with are people from their own reality or from other realities. So that's sort of the basic idea of this plotline. It was very interesting. I thought it was a very unique plotline, and I was pleasantly surprised.
Yeah, so I knew this was going to be hard for us because the techniques of this film intertwine with the plot. So you did a great job explaining when we get there, talk about the multiple realities. But I think to take a step back, I think we should remember when you first watch it, if you don't have any, didn't do any reading like I did beforehand, it's not apparent in the beginning.
No, it is not, and it's purposely kept that way.
Yeah, exactly. It's not apparent in the beginning. My first thought actually I thought I was watching kind of I knew something was off. So basically in the beginning, the main character you follow mainly, Emily, her phone kind of cracks. It's supposed to I guess it freezes or something and it breaks in the car. And we'll get back to that later. But basically, I just wanted to give the audience kind of a feel for when you watch this film, even though we just said a lot about multiverse and a lot of things, it's not apparent to you until later when they start discussing it. So to the film's credit, it kind of gets you there. But then when you get there, you start thinking of you start going
all the possibilities.
You start going back and did I miss something? But when you're first watching it, you think this is it is a person drama, but you think that you're just getting one of those typical dinner party, actors lines, I think you get what kind of film I'm talking about, Alexis. But it is very interesting that initially it's not apparent. It's kind of weird with the comment they mentioned and the phone thing is your first clue, but I think before we even get to the multiple houses and the multiple universes, I just wanted to emphasize that it's an interesting start, and even as a viewer, you're kind of tricked in the beginning.
So the director, when he was first coming up with the script for this film, him and the people he was working with essentially wanted to make a film. Before they even came up with the script, they had the idea of shooting a film that revolved primarily around his living room. And I would say about 60 to 65% of the movie is shot within the living room. And the rest of the movie is shot basically on the streets around their house and a couple of the other rooms. So it was a very interesting, it was a very interesting film because most of the location doesn't really change that often, which was really fascinating and very unique, I felt. I haven't seen too many films that are quite like that. That just pretty much the singular location is like the bulk of the film. There's not a lot of dynamism in terms of the location itself, but more like the events that happen in that location and the surrounding locations.
Yeah.
So is there anything you wanted to... Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say, only I'll add about, like, we just haven't done a lot of those movies, but I already can think of some where 90% of the movie is like basically like a play where it's only one setting.
Really? What movie is coming to mind?
I don't want to tip my hand because they're on the list.
All right.
But there's a few movies I can think of. But those movies, like you said, like they tend to be character driven. And like I said, what I like about this film is that it's not just character driven, but there is that extra element of science fiction and mystery, and also again, we're gonna get suspense too. But also, like I said, when we get to the time and manipulation, it's gonna get great. It's gonna get interesting. Yeah, I think on the like to your point, like regarding the setting, for a film with the budget that it had, and and the constraints they had, I give it a lot of credit because it shows you that sometimes when you're under constraints, you have the most creativity. I think we've mentioned this before with Primer.
Mm-hmm.
I think we did a film recently called Absentia that it didn't fit my cup of tea, but the it's a film where like it's a good contrast because you see in that film they had constraints and they didn't rise above them, and it's harder. So I'll say that like I give extra points for films that can do that because it's like Pi is another example where you don't have that kind of like extra money, so you have to work with what you have. And honestly, like to the writer, the director, and the writer's credit, I think he mainly wrote the script too. It's a really good job because you see that like he's able to use his constraints to his advantage. Yeah, and that's I tip my hat literally. So.
Yeah, the one other thing that I'll point out is I was very impressed because I've never seen these actors, at least to my knowledge, in any other roles, and I was very impressed by their performance, and it seemed very natural and like believable. There was no performance that stuck out to me that I thought that was bad. Whereas in a previous film that was small budget that we did, Absentia, there were several characters in there that just they weren't that great, and it could have been some of their talent or the poor screenwriting or a combination of the two. But in this case, everything seemed very fluid, like you were at the dinner party with them. And yeah, to their credit, I think they did an outstanding job. And part of, I think, what led to that really good chemistry and dynamism amongst the crew is that in an interview, the director basically pointed out, he said most of the film, the lines in the film were improvised. They had some direction where they wanted to go, but they improvised quite a few of the lines. There were a couple of key ones, and we'll get to those later, where the director said no, the actors had no choice. They had to like put those in because they were very crucial, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think the director says that like it's 98% spontaneous with some direction, minus the 2% that they told him this is the line.
You need to put this in.
Yeah, but what's interesting is that he did say, like, because I know what line you're referencing mainly is the one with Mike. What was interesting is that he talks about. I saw 2 interviews. I think probably you saw the same one, and I saw one other one. But he goes over the same points mainly. But he does say that like he tells him the line, but he tells the actor, you need to figure out when it's the right time though. So still, even though it's that part is scripted, its placement isn't. So I found fascinating too.
That was cool. Yeah, it was something that was a very unique trait to the film.
Yeah, I felt like, to your point, I felt like I feel like I was just a mute person literally in the movie. Like I felt like I was just there observing. Like I just was the shy guy in the dinner party.
Yeah,
it was that natural. And I do want to get to like let's do it first pass for the film, but then I want to get to like my theories about things. But
sure, yeah, I'll get there. But the one other thing I want to add is during the casting process for this film, I thought that was also important. Apparently, the director he basically wanted to cast all of the roles with actors and actresses that did not know each other, had never previously worked together. I thought that was a very interesting choice, and it ended up working out very well for him in the end.
That's interesting. I didn't know that one. That's a good tip.
Yeah. So yeah, there were a lot of things like that where it was just like, wow, like just interesting little backdrops that went on behind the scenes that really led to like this really good film.
No, yeah, I agree. There was a lot of little details and like things that like are just really astounding in this particular movie.
Yeah. Anyway, so you said you wanted to go with the first pass.
Yeah, I like just get the main plot points because I think with this film,
Sure.
it's easy if you don't have if you haven't watched it, it's tough to follow. It's going to be tough to follow this
We
episode
would both recommend that, like, just as a record, there's going to be obviously our whole podcast is just spoilers because we go through the plots, but specifically with this film where there's a lot of mystery and science fiction, the plot tends to get very convoluted very quickly. You should definitely watch the film before you watch our sort of review and breakdown.
Yeah, because with this, especially with this film, the techniques used in the filmmaking is part of the plot line too, in a sense. So it is also a part of the crafting of the experience. So it doesn't even, our conversation doesn't do it justice to like a good viewing, good first or second viewing. That's, like I said, that my stipulation. But yeah, like, there's a lot of things we can get to, but I guess, we should get to like the main like storyline, right? So
sure.
Emily goes to or M as they call her in the film often. She gets to the dinner party already she's there with her boyfriend, right? But she starts like giving a sour face because she hears that like his ex is coming, Lori, right? And, she's kind of pouting. And then they have that conversation about like, oh, you should, can you want to, where did he want her to go? What was his name again?
Who are you referring to?
It's Kevin, right?
Right.
Remember in the beginning they're having that conversation and Kevin's asking her to go somewhere. I forgot where.
Oh, he's going to Vietnam.
Yeah, and she's like, this is
becoming hesitant.
Yeah, this becomes important later.
Mm-hmm.
And so you have this like, this is like I said, the beginning gives you the sense that it's just going to be like a, like a people kind of like, drama, kind of thing. But then they add the comments, the meteor comment stuff. And that's when you start like seeing a change because like, I forgot which character is like, oh, don't panic everybody, but do we have Skype, remember? And he's like, and they're like, why? He's like, well, I was just told to call my brother in case like
the theoretical physicist.
Yeah, if there's something weird's going on. I forgot what character is that. Hugh?
That is, I believe so.
Okay,
I'll double check just to make sure.
Yeah, in this movie, the names are important, and I try to remember, but there's so many characters.
There's Hugh. Yeah.
So I think I'll hear about your opinion, but I guess what was the scene or what was the moment it kind of like like I said the coin flipped, like, hey, well this is gonna be interesting, like. Right, because it's a little bit of, even though it's not a long movie, it's a bit of a slow build up in the beginning,
It's a slow build up, and then you hit about minute 45, about halfway through, and then you're like, what?
Whoa!
All possibilities sort of smack you in the face. Really, the biggest one is you don't really know the extent to which their reality has been distorted until you see that. Really, the moment that hit me, I think we've talked about this before, was when you see, I believe it's Amir and Hugh go to one of the different rooms. They close the door behind them, and they reveal that they are not from the same house. They're actually two characters from a different house. And it was a beautifully done scene where they sort of pull out their glow sticks, and just to bring, I guess, like this point up, the house that they were currently in, that you think that they're a part of, were all identified as having blue glow sticks. But once these two came back, they were able to naturally converse, and so you thought that they were just the two people who are there from their reality, but you don't see their glow sticks at any point in time Everything seems normal, and then later on, the film lulls you to forgetting that they left, and then it cuts you to them going on into a different room and revealing that they have red glow sticks, meaning that they're from a different house, a different reality. And that's the moment where I was like, whoa. And then all of a sudden, all the possibilities start going through your head as to, like, can I really believe anything I've seen or take it as face value? That was the moment, and I was like, this is going to be a great film.
Yeah, I agree. Where that's the scene where I was like, wow, this is definitely like, it's taken a really unexpected turn, and it's like the coin flip. But I was gonna say that a bit earlier, when I had started having suspicions that this was going to be a totally different experience, is when they leave for that. Remember, so they don't have there's no phone, right? They're all like, there's no Skype, no internet. So the Hugh and Lee leave for the other house, right? When they come out with this weird box, and I think Hugh has the cut, right? That's when I was just like, what happened? And then Hugh doesn't want to say what happened there. And I'm like, that's when I started feeling like, woo. And then, like, yeah, right, a little bit later, we get to that specific scene. I go like, well, okay, now we're in a different ball game here, you know?
Yeah, I was very confused when they brought the box with the different pictures and different numbers behind it.
Yeah.
But you don't quite know what it signifies. It's not really until they reveal the red glow sticks where it's like, oh man, everything you've seen, like, you have to. It's kind of like that whole idea of question everything. That's really.
That happens. That happens when the glow sticks are revealed.
Yeah.
My only point is that I felt like when they came back with the box, I was like, this is definitely it's gonna subvert my expectations. And also the other aspect is, you also, like you said, you start thinking back, and remember we discussed this offline, where that little scene of like 2 seconds where they're talking to each other, and Hugh and Lee are talking to each other, like whispering in their ears. Now you're like, oh, that's when they realize that
they realize that it's not the house that they thought they were coming back to, the reality. And I can't. I've only seen the film once. I plan to go rewatch it again at some point, but I can't remember what the conversation that preceded that exchange of whispering. Because it was something that was said in conversation that definitely triggered their realization that they are in the wrong reality.
Yeah, or it's not their house, right?
Yeah, which, aka, it's not their reality.
Yeah, and what's interesting, I think even at this point, they only talk about 2 houses, but then later it becomes like you can have an infinite amount of houses.
Yep.
And that's when your mind starts rolling a little bit. But yeah, that glow stick scene is like really well done, well crafted. And I think the reason I bring up the box and then that little, like I said, that scene where they're whispering each other's ears, is that you realize that the buildup, you didn't even realize the buildup to that scene. That's what's crazy about that scene. Like the hints are there, but you only know that in retrospective, right? It's just, top.
No, it was very well done in terms of the editing, in terms of everything was super done for a specific reason that just led to like a seamless fluidity in the film that really like shocks the audience. At least that's how I felt.
Yeah.
So something that I want to bring up, just because I'm a big fan of the show too, and it's sort of cartoon science fiction-y, but it's really sort of the plotline kind of parallels a little bit of one of the Rick and Morty episodes of A Wrinkle in Time. So if you in our audience are fans of Rick and Morty, this is the episode where essentially they sort of become decohered from their time reality, and then the longer that they go on without sort of syncing all of their realities together, then the amount of uncertainty just continues to increase. That's somewhat of what is essentially happening in this film too. Although the realities aren't just expanding, it's just an infinite number of possibilities.
Yeah, and it's like you said, it's like a dead spot. So it's only in like this specific, and they say neighborhood, but you have the feeling it's the specific house.
Yeah.
And that's what's like also like it lets it, like I said, the directors are able to have this kind of creativity with just, like I said, doing it in his living room basically.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, that's a nice shout out to Rick and Morty. Good show. I will say that, like, so that's the glow 16, right? So then I think what happens right after, I'm trying to remember. I think it's like there's a little more conversation. But there's the other scene that I really enjoyed. I'm probably skipping some details. Is
Go ahead.
when they group goes out to the to go to the other house.
I know exactly what you're talking about.
And then like that's when you start like freaking out because they go to the. I think it's because Mike, he remember. So actually, before that, even I think Mike is talking to Kevin around like, oh, I'm gonna drop off blackmail,
Mhm.
and he tells him not to do it, and like he's like, oh well, when we go out, like I'll sneak in, I'll just drop it off, and blah blah blah, right? But like, yeah, that's a side, like it's important later, but that's a little side conversation they have. But yeah, the whole scene where they go and then they freak out because Mike's like, wait, this is my house.
So
It's not a stranger's house, and then like they turn around, they see like basically themselves with different glow sticks, and
yeah,
like, running the other way. It was mental.
Yes, but I also thought that at that point when I saw that scene, I thought that they were all doing the exact same thing. Their moves were being mirrored, but obviously I was wrong in retrospect at that point.
Oh yeah.
What was interesting, another scene that kind of stuck out to me was, I believe it was Mike was the one who was kind of like, he's having a moment where I thought he was going to have like a psychological breakdown, if you will, because he was like freaking out over the reality. And then he was talking about going and killing himself over there. And he's like, but they were all trying to convince him that's crazy. That's you. And he's like, yeah, but what if that me is trying to kill me? And it's just like a weird conversation and breakdown to have. And he's like, and if I'm drunk over there, that Mike may or may not be drunk. And he's like, I got to go take advantage of that situation and like be the preemptive striker. I was like, what the hell? Like, that's just a weird mind game that you're just like playing. But it made for a very good script.
Well, the other mind game they played was like, remember, like he realized that his brother left the book in the trunk, right? And they opened the physics book, and then they start brainstorming like, well, maybe in this other home they haven't had a chance to open the trunk yet.
That's what triggered the fact. I just realized that must have been what triggered the Hugh and Mir, the ones that weren't from the reality. The fact that they had that book and realized what was going on. That must have been what triggered them to leave and realize that wasn't their reality.
Yeah. Right, because their logic was kind of correct, right? When they were discussing it, they're like, yeah, in other homes, they potentially haven't opened the trunk yet. And it's like, boom, like you're like, dang, dude, how far are we going down here? We're going to go into multiverse theory. Okay.
They really went pretty big into multiverse theory.
Yeah, so we haven't even gone to the ending, but I'll say this. I was thinking about the movie all week, and I'm actually convinced that because in the first scene, the phone, like, M's phone, like cracks, freezes, or whatever you want to call it. That to me marks when the dead spot happens, and not everybody has reached the house. We're not told the timing of when they reach. So I'm actually
you're not even told where exactly the dead spot is around the house.
Yeah, and the way, like, and you open my eyes when you say like look at the clothing and stuff. I'm almost like 95% sure that even when we get to the first scene, many of the people there are actually not even part of the original universe that they were coming from. Like, we actually have a mishmash from the get-go. Yeah. And so that opens your eyes to like everything, because I'm also thinking of like, let's go to Laurie's character in the beginning a little bit. There's two scenes that really stick out to me. The one that you mentioned with the Roswell, right? Mike's been in Roswell in this universe, right?
Uh-huh.
And Laurie's like, you're not recognizable. What character? Like, I don't recognize your face.
I'm the main one.
Yeah, and
that's what he tells her.
Yeah, exactly, right. And here, this came out of the director's interview. The actor that played Mike was told, like, no, you're in Roswell, and gave Laurie's actress, like, he's not in. He's not in, like, you have to be convinced that he's not in. So that's how that scene played out. Yeah. But when they're doing the small talk in the beginning, I forgot who asks. I don't know if it's M or Beth. Might be Beth, but some character asks Laurie, like, oh, how's yoga? And she's like, oh, I don't do yoga.
Yeah,
like, I don't teach that, right? But then when she's kind of like flirting with
later on
Kevin, she's like, oh, didn't you love that yoga session we did? I was just like, I mean, obviously it's a sexual innuendo, but
yeah,
I was just like, wait, she just said she doesn't know any yoga, and now you're like, I was just like, gave me more evidence that, like, oh my goodness, like this, we've been seeing like probably like 50 versions of Laurie in this movie. 50 is an exaggeration, but like I was just like, okay, this movie is so trippy that.
Well, okay, so the other part of this film that we didn't talk about is there's a lot of timed cuts. In many films, cuts are sort of done seamlessly, so you can't really tell when they're there. Here, it's like a cut to a blank screen at a lot of times, and part of that is intentional to sort of signify that you're going to a different reality, and that's what even blows your mind even more to these like possibilities as well. Like that was purposely done as a director to signify, all right, you're in reality A, now we're going to reality C. And so you don't really know, and it makes you a little disoriented too.
Yeah, and then we listened to probably the same interview, but like the director goes like he basically gives you the main big hint if you're watching it is that you follow basically the original M that you do follow. The movie is centered around her, so you do follow her. Or he says, I think in the interview, like it's the key is to understand this movie is that M that you see in the beginning is basically you follow her story basically. In a sense.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I don't know.
I didn't see that one.
I maybe we saw different interviews, but if you maybe I'll find a few afterwards. But yeah, he said like the person asking him like about the character Emily, and he says that like like she's the key. When you see her in the beginning, you're basically she's the person we're following throughout, and that kind of like opens your mind even more because at the end, like first time I saw at the end, I thought we were seeing potentially an alternate universe Emily, which I think is still the case. But now I'm like questioning because like I thought like my first viewing, I thought without doing the director's interview, I was kind of convinced that like maybe like the Emily we see at the end isn't really the original Emily, but then he says we follow her throughout, so it's like my mind's blown again. So so it is one of those things where it's like, dang, because my original interpretation of the ending when we get there is like potentially we're not really seeing like M, we're seeing like another M, like there's so many of them now, right? That's the thing that's hard to track is that potentially you've been seeing so many different variations of the character, like you said with the clothes, right? Like, remember how like when she attacks the we're jumping around because this movie does that, okay?
Yeah.
But do you remember when M attacks the other M? And we'll explain why she does this.
Yeah.
Like she puts on the sweater.
Yeah.
And then like the other M's you see later don't have the sweater. That's why I was kind of convinced that like the original M has the sweater on and the other alternative reality ones don't. And you're right, there's little things with the clothing. It's like crazy. But before we jump that far to the end, we kind of were discussing the middle piece. Is there any else that before we get to like the final stretch, anything else that you wanted to talk about?
I'm trying to think because like it's kind of like a blur in a way when you're like watching the film. Really, the glow sticks was a scene that stood out to me. That revelation. Some of the like the final like 10-minute sequence is like wild as well. Trying to think, was there? Oh, the one that also was kind of creepy was when she goes, and you can tell. So a lot of this is you see really the relationships are like there's a lot of friction in some of the relationships in certain realities, right? And some they're better, right? Because the scenarios just changed, people's like minds on certain things have changed. Some there's just a lot of friction, and then one of the craziest was also when you get the letter from from Mike, I believe it was, that was blackmailing himself, and you get the letter and Hugh looks at it like, what does this mean? What does this mean? And then everyone knows but Hugh, and you're like, this is not going to end well. Yeah. And then he does say that line where basically what he says. What Mike is trying to say to himself is like, hey, like, don't do anything stupid. I'm trying to scare you. And he sort of codes the revelation that he had slept with Hugh's wife. I believe her name was Beth, if I'm not mistaken, right?
It's
with Beth. And so then Hugh kind of realizes something's up. And he's like, what does this mean? He's like, well, what is it? And Beth goes away. And then it's revealed that essentially that that Mike had slept with Beth, and Hugh was the only one who didn't know. But then they're trying to convince him, hey, like we're all from different realities, right? He's like, I'm not even the Mike that you know. And then he's like, or she's not the M that you know, blah, blah, blah. We're all from different places, so how can you like take it out on me? And then they said some other line, and then it just follows by, there's a million different versions of me, and every one of them I've slept with your wife or something like that. And you're just like, wow, what a line at that moment.
And also, I have to do a minor correction on myself. It's actually Hugh and Amir that leave the house. I think I said
Yeah,
Beth.
Hugh and
Beth
Amir,
is the Beth is the you're right, the Hugh's
wife.
no, no, actually that might no, Beth is the one with the glasses, right?
No. Beth is Hugh's wife.
Okay.
Yeah.
The
I think you might be thinking of Lori, or no, you're thinking of Mike's wife, right? This is Lee.
Oh, Lee is Mike's
Yeah.
wife. Yeah. Yep. Okay. Yeah. Just the names jumbled up a little
Yeah.
bit.
Well, there's like 4 couples, so it gets confusing.
Yeah. That is true too. And then they're all like half cheating with each other. So you're like, what the heck? But
and they're all just a bunch of 4 white couples. So yeah, the all gets confusing.
with all standard names. Like
yeah. Lee, Beth, Kevin, and Hugh.
The only one
Lori,
that is Amir. The Amir was interesting. Remember when they take the photo of him and you're like,
oh yeah, that was weird.
I was like, well, this photo was taken the night of, and you're like, what? We're in the Twilight Zone. You know?
Yeah. You do get Twilight Zone vibes from this film. Very much.
Yes, you definitely do. Yeah. So about the box, let's go back to the box. So obviously the box is important, right? So it shows up early-ish when they bring it from the other house, or the orange glow stick ones of Hugh and Amir. And then they actually have the same idea, right? Like, oh, we should just pick random numbers and right behind the pictures and
stuff.
stuff.
They do it by rolling die.
Yeah, because it's random and stuff.
But then even make it even more, increase the odds that this wouldn't happen in any reality. Then they also have an identifier object.
Yeah.
That's where the ping pong, because like in that box when they open it up, it's got pictures of all of them, and then a certain number between all the cards, and so they were really confused. But it also had a ping pong paddle, and so that's when you were like, "What on earth is going on?" But that's the identifier object.
Yeah.
So it increases their odds that they're in of uniqueness by I don't know what the factor is.
Yeah, and that's supposed to help them when like if they leave the home, they know if they're in the right home or not.
Right. So it was just interesting. Yeah, I don't know what more you want to like touch upon that.
No, I'm just curious about like that as a like I give again the film credit because that's a really unique kind of take on a situation. Like first of all, the situation is unique, right? And then even their supposed solution is interesting, right? Because first when you see
it's a great solution though.
First when you see the box, you're just confused, and then later you're like, oh, this makes sense. So I think that's credit to the movie where like, it gets you from like, what the F is this like box? And you're like, no, this makes sense. Put the paddle in there.
Put your left shoe in there. Something like that.
And that's why like this film, like I said, I hope people just watch it before even listening to our rambling, because you watch it like in one way, like but then as soon as those twists come in and you start learning more, you start like you realizing the film is really non-linear, and it's like and it's a very unique experience, you know, like you go back and you start reinterpreting scenes that you saw earlier, you know.
It makes you it's definitely you really question what you've been watching the whole time.
Yeah, and I think the director got his goal done. In one of the interviews I saw, he was talking about how his goal was to like get the viewer, you and I, like to watch this film and think that you're actually watching a film that's composed of different films. Basically, like the film itself is multiversal, you know, universal, you know. So like you can in theory watch the film, you know, from beginning to end, but you can also watch it from minute 50 forward and go back to minute, 2. I was just like, oh, that's opening up a wealth of possibilities. You know?
Yeah.
Because you can have different interpretations just on like how you viewed it, or like think about if you're watching with a family, you just stepped out to the bathroom and they didn't want to stop it and you come back. I mean, you can have entirely different viewpoints on the film, you know, because it's that kind of film.
Movie. Yeah, it's just a wild film in terms of like, I've never had a film quite where like you've seen it in the midway, you kind of question what you've been watching up to that point.
Yeah, and so one thing I would say is that what you think of the when Emily, like, so Emily's okay, so she sees that her album was like, you know, I'm not gonna cuss here, but it's messed up and it's crazy and everybody's fighting, and she sees that Lori and Kevin are pretty much gonna get back together, so she says, I'm out. And then she walks around the neighborhood supposedly, which I doubt it's a neighborhood. I think she's just walking around the same.
Oh no, she's going from home back to the dead zone to home to different realities.
What did you think of all those different realities? I thought that was interesting.
So I thought that was very interesting, and it makes you wonder, right? Like what everyone would sort of choose. Because if anyone was in that position, I think a lot of people would do what M would do, and just go and try to find, their quote unquote utopia reality, where things work out, where everything's normal, things like that. Why would you want to deal with the hellish chaos that was coming from her original reality? And I guess that's what was terrifying, was that how quickly people would just abandon their normal situation if they had the ability to. I think that's really what that sequence was trying to show. Is that I think a lot of people would just give up what they had in search of something better in a heartbeat.
Yeah. What was interesting is also she walks through these homes, right? And you see like the work, like even places that are worse, right? Like you see the two mics, like with tape. And
you see every scenario.
Yeah, you see other houses where like they're at each other's throats, about to like kill each other, and then you see like the one she sees the ones that are better, right? And then she gets the one that's like basically heaven, right? Like, oh wait, like this M in this universe has said like, oh, I'm going to Vietnam, we're so happy, and she's like, oh, I want that, and you're right, like it does have that little human touch of like, oh, I can just kill that one and I can be in there. I
can take her place.
And actually that ties into something that I think Mike is the other, in my opinion, like the strongest character other than M, because Mike has that dialogue, I believe, where he says like, maybe we're the bad versions. It doesn't dawn on most of them, right? They all think they're we're the good guys,
ones.
Yeah, but maybe he's like, we're the bad versions because look how we're acting. And like you see, like when you see the other houses, you start realizing that Mike was probably on the money.
Or maybe he was somewhere in between.
Yeah, like somewhere in that variation. But M going like AWOL and saying like, I'm taking the other M out. I was like, yeah, you're definitely dark M.
Yeah, man, that was wild. But then she was smart in terms of she lured them out by breaking a window.
Yeah, because she knows. I think it was her car. I mean, her car in the other universes. Yeah. So she knew that that M would come out.
Well, because she knew while that wasn't that M, it was her, so she knew some of the habits or how things would play out because they kind of played out that way in the other reality.
Yeah.
It was wild, sort of this whole concept of like multiple different realities and you knowing your weaknesses so you can use that to your advantage.
So what did you think of the bathroom scene with the two Emilys?
It's brutal, man. And I'm still kind of confused as to what exactly happened. Because you don't know, right?
Yeah, this is why I was like, my original theory before I listened to the director interview was like, that when we're seeing that fight, it's probably, so there's, I'm going to say M1, potentially 2 and 3. I thought those two M's in the bathroom were actually not the M that we saw with the sweater, right? Because the sweater one, she beat up the one in the car, right? Put her in the trunk and then grabbed the sweater. And then like you see the two M's fighting, but like the sweater's like, maybe she took it off. But I thought that fight might have been like alternate Emily's too. So like
it could have been, yeah. I'm pretty sure. I think there were like 4. I didn't quite work it out, but I was speculating there were 4 Emily's in that like last 5-minute sequence, and I was trying to figure out what exactly was going on.
And I think she faints because like the dead zone passes, right? So now there's 2 M's in a certain unit. So basically, one universe is missing an M.
Yeah.
One universe has like the one with
2
the sweater,
M's. Yeah.
And one has 2 M's. And that's when you see that last scene with the phone call, which is Kevin saying like, "You're calling me," and then he has that look, and then it cuts, right?
Yeah.
So we'll get into what you think happened after that, but
I'm not exactly sure what happened after.
But that whole lot, like you said, that last 10-minute sequence is like crazy. It's just straight up crazy.
Yeah, it's trippy as hell. There's just no other way to describe it because I was going through like, what on earth? And then what are they going to do with the 2 M's?
Yeah,
is he gonna have 2 wives and they're both the same person?
So when the director says that like you follow like M throughout, that's why I have to like. He's a nice director. Yeah, he says fan theories a lot of them are good and actually make sense. But when he says like when the interviewer asks him the question about M, and he says like you follow her throughout, that's what threw me off now recently. Like I was like, oh, now like so basically maybe one of them are the original, like the one we saw in the beginning. And it's like, oh, so maybe that was the original one we see at the end. So I'm just kind of like, oof, because my original theory was that they were the ones the bathroom fight was alternate Emily. So this movie, man,
it gets you.
Yeah, it definitely gets you, and it gets you thinking forever. So it's credit to the film.
Yeah, not many films can do it and do it in a very convincing way like they did.
Yes. It was natural, like you said. Everything all the decisions they made around like the script, like you said, in parts have it scripted, other parts not. Also, a lot of it was shot in 5 days.
Oh, the other scene that was. No, I'll let you go first.
Yeah, so it was shot in 5 days, and he actually says that a lot of it's funny. Unlike Primer, where he didn't have enough footage, he threw out a lot of the extra stuff because apparently they sometimes experimented, and it went a direction. He even had to say like, "Hey, let's bring it back here. Let's get back to the table. We were talking about this. Let's rewind the script a little bit. Let's start from here again." And then he would guide them, right? Because he kind of knew where he wanted the story to go. So he would say like, okay, we were talking about the comment. Let's continue that. Because sometimes it was so natural, spontaneous that he was even saying that like, they would start talking about the comment, and suddenly we're talking about like cars, and it's like, no, let's wind it back. Kind of like how normal people talk, right? We'll start with the topic, and then we'll end up with like different thread, right? Sure. So he threw away a lot of the footage. I'm actually would be curious to see like if there was like a raw, like all the cuts. It would be interesting to see like all the different iterations of this movie.
I'm sure.
So, anyways, go ahead.
What I will say is a scene that we didn't talk about that was kind of funny at first, because this is before you really know what's going on, was that they realized what happened to. I'm trying to remember her name. When Lee wakes up and they realize that she was given ketamine, and that Beth gave her some ketamine, and then it comes to the idea, they're like, wait a second. Basically, they all have the suspicion, Beth, did you drug us all? Is that why we're having all of these like hallucinations?
Yeah, and it wouldn't make sense, right? They're like, it would explain everything, though.
Yeah, but it didn't. You've kind of realized that later on. The other thing that was interesting is that when they leave the house at one point, we didn't really discuss that, they leave the house and they come back in, and a lot of the glasses are broken. And so I was wondering what your interpretation from that was. There's a lot of damage.
Yeah, so you're right with especially the broken glass. I know we didn't talk about, but that's another hint to you, the viewer, that you're not in the same universe as you started with, right? Because none of the glasses were broken when we first get introduced to our first universe. So to me, I thought it represented that we missed whatever happened before. Right. So like you said, like these little tricks that I didn't realize until you brought them up, and had to, listen to more interviews with like the fade to black and the clothing. And like, I think the glass thing is also another, like, because what you notice in this film is that all the shots are purposeful. When Amir and Hugh whisper in each other's ear, that broken glass, Lori and the, that hot yoga insinuation.
Well, I also think that, so to like add on that, I think the characters, or like them, at least the mixture of them from different realities, them being in the house, that sort of ties the house to some sort of constant, aka like the characters. And so when they step out of the house or leave, I think it sort of decoheres them from even that little bit of reality as well. And so things start to shatter and break because they're not really coherent to anything.
Exactly. Like it seems like it's funny how this movie could have been a 2-minute movie if they listened to, was it Hugh? Who said like, no, it was not Hugh. Somebody
just stay in the house.
Yeah, somebody said stay in the house, and I look back at that early scene and I go, this movie would have ended then if they just all stay in the house.
Yeah.
Like people could have come in, they could have just said, you're not coming.
That's what happened in that ideal reality. Everything was fine. Like they blacked out, but they went with candles, and no one got all these crazy ideas. And that's it just worked out.
Exactly. Yeah, it's just crazy. Like I said, when you think back to earlier scenes, you're like, wow, so if they just boarded up the doors and say like, because people would knock, right? Because some other universes would do the experimentation of just go out there, right? But if they just stay in the home, this movie would have been like the rom-com or something.
Very different film.
So yeah, I agree with that assessment with the glass and like the house being kind of like the one thing that like is your rock, you said it best, constant. So, but it is funny how like if they
I wouldn't even say that the house was a constant. I would say the characters in the house, the characters are the constant, right? Because when they're in the house, the power goes off or whatever, but nothing really breaks, so it's not really coherent, like decoherent from everything. So that's the concept in which the reality around them is like tied to or is held together.
Yeah, so as soon as everybody's moving around, it's definitely
Things change.
Mixes everything up.
Yeah. There's some cool ideas in this film, and then they tied in a little bit of like Schrodinger's cat within the plot too.
Yeah, I think that was introduced to really like get you thinking about multiverses, you know?
Yeah.
Right? Because I will say that there were, again, I give film the credits that they do the build up from like just think of 2 houses, then think of N houses, you know?
Mm-hmm.
When they did the cat thing, I was really thinking of N houses. I was just okay, we're probably not just 2 houses. Like,
oh yeah, no. As soon as they brought up the Schrodinger's cat like analogy, I was like, oh, there's infinite possibilities.
Yeah. So I for like, as long as that zone lasted, there was infinite possibility, infinite universes, which is like great. Like I said, it felt very Twilight Zone ish.
Yeah, it was. There's nothing to say other than this is a really good science fiction film. In my opinion, it's one of the best ones I've ever seen.
Yeah, it's very creative. It's bold. You know, it uses film techniques to its advantage, and you know, it feels like an indie film, right? Like, okay, the budget was low, but it has that quality of a decent, you know, indie film, right? I didn't have the quality, obviously, of like this blockbuster, but it was like a film that, like, if you told me it was only like X amount, I'd be like, wow, it's surprising because it didn't feel like it was just cheap. You know, the writing didn't feel cheap, the editing didn't feel cheap, and that's a huge credit to. I mean, there's some luck involved, right? Like cameras now are better for this kind of budget than they were 30 years ago. But my opinion, like just because you're a lower budget, you know, you can always good writing is priceless, good acting is priceless. Like you can, you know, just because you have a low budget isn't an excuse to have a subpar film.
Right. That's why you cut no slack to Cynthia.
Yeah, no slack, dude. No slack, dude.
Oh man. Yeah, is there anything else that you want to touch on with this film? I mean, well, it's very interesting, and there's many theories you can go with. Once you sort of figure out what's going on, it's not like there's not too much beyond it, other than this many different worlds. Some of the philosophical implications behind it, which you can go on forever, right?
Yeah, I guess it's like it's a film that you can rewatch like every 3 years and try to pick something out that you didn't pick up the first time.
This is a very good film because you can figure out something new every time you watch it, I feel like.
I have a question. I wasn't able to find the answer. I don't know if you have. I don't. If you didn't, it's fine. I know that the film was filmed. I know it's supposed to take place in California. And do you know where, like, what location exactly? Because you said it was his living room, but I don't know where. Like,
I mentioned Los Angeles.
Maybe to protect himself, he didn't.
I mentioned somewhere in Southern California.
Okay, yeah, because I was just curious because like I couldn't like find an actual data.
I have a feeling it's Southern California. I mean, that's where most of the directors and people involved in Hollywood, live. It's probably like San Bernardino or somewhere.
Okay. Yeah. Other than that was my only I just didn't know if you knew or had an idea.
I had no idea. I didn't look into it to that degree. But yeah. So, is there anything else that you wanted to sort of touch upon? Any specific?
No, that was the last. That was my last question. I was just curious about the specific location. Yeah. Other than that,
Oh, another really good scene actually is. Hold on, just real quick. So the last scene that I guess sort of stuck out, what was interesting, and I knew something was wrong, was when Em actually goes to her car and then she sees Kevin, and they had been fighting, and she's like, "Hey, is everything going on with like Laurie?" She's like, "Oh," he's like, "Well, I don't know what's going on in her mind, but we're good." And then she says something else, and then realizes that's not really Kevin, and then the lighting is kind of red under him to like signify like a different Kevin.
Yeah, because it's like because she's making, it makes, like, we do this all the time as humans, right? Like, she's talking to him as if they just had like the conversation earlier, and he's just totally like, you see on his, I give credit to the actor because you see on his face, he's like, what is she talking about? Like, we didn't, like, I don't know what is going, like, we're fine, like, what is this, when she's clearly in her universe is losing to Laurie, Oh, what did you think? Okay, real quick, I guess because there's so many little tidbits. Lori hecka freaked out when she got a little bit of blood on her. I thought that was kind of interesting.
What
I
was
don't
this?
know. There was that scene where, when Mike gets beat up by Hugh. Remember they're fighting because he's pissed about the
Uh-huh.
knife thing. And I think like some blood gets on Lori and she just freaks out. Like I thought that was kind of like, I don't know if it means anything, but it was just kind of
Oh, I didn't really pay
interesting.
attention to that. I got to go re-look at that scene. I didn't
Yeah,
pick up on that.
she freaks out in a way that was like, I felt like, see, I don't have an interpretation yet, but it was so like visceral that I was like,
So over the top.
yeah, I was like, there's maybe something here, but I haven't been able to piece it
Figure it
together.
out.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'll take a look at it and try to see if I can figure it out. I'm sure we'll discuss it at some point. But yeah, I think that was like the only other scenes that we didn't really cover that were kind of interesting in the film. Yeah, I thought this. I also really liked the length of the film. It was fairly short. It wasn't like super long. It's about an hour and a half. And they were able to pack a lot in there.
Yeah. I mean, my personal take on length is that if it works for the film, it works for the film. Like I don't mind 5
If they
hours.
if they made this an epic of like 3 hours long, I would have minded.
Okay, well, I don't think that's why I say for that film,
Yeah.
I don't know if you can drag it out an hour and a half, but some films they need that 2 hours and 50 minutes.
Cheers.
Other films needs like only 1 hour and like 10.
Yeah.
I think it's hard to quantify that. Yeah, I think we've covered a lot that I want to discuss anyways, and to highlight that this film is unique in a lot of ways, and to its credit, there's a reason why I think it's still every now and again I can tell that it's going to resurface as like, oh, how come nobody's talking about this movie? Because it's like a good cult niche classic. So.
Yep. 100% agree. Anyway, so let's get into final ratings then.
I can start.
Yeah, I'll let you go.
Yeah, so with this film, it's tough, I was trying to find some kind of fault because I'm critical. I think and I'm still going to give it so preface everything here. I'm still going to give it a 10 out of 10. The only reason I was doubting to get it just 9.5 is the one aspect, because I really thought about, I'm a nitpicker. So the one aspect that I was looking for, like a weakness, would have been that in this film, I didn't feel like this transcendent human story, like with maybe other films. But I think again, I'm not going to hold it against this film because, it wasn't the point of this movie. And so I'm okay saying 10 out of 10. But like when I say transcendent film, I mean, like there's films that are about like, the Irish Revolution or, woman poverty or, feminism or,
this is a science fiction film, Chris.
Yeah. But some sci-fi films can really have that deeper human psychological element, which we haven't done one yet, but
okay.
That could happen too. This did have that, but I think it's hard, right? Like he's trying to do a lot in a film, and like he doesn't have the budget either to like do sequels and stuff. But I think it did enough to warrant still the 10 out of 10 I'm giving it. But I was just saying, if I had a nitpick, I was really, really driving home there, and even then, I recognize that like I'm really, really like grasping for straws a little bit. So
yeah, I will completely disagree with you there. I thought that the ending did a good job of sort of driving home something deeper in a way, and that M was very quick to sort of pick up and leave the reality that she just didn't like, that it was kind of falling apart. So she was just searching the multiverse until she found her perfect utopia. I was like, whoa, yeah, how many people would do that? I think a lot of people would. And so like it sort of leaves you kind of horrified in a way at how quickly she does that. Just drops the pieces and just says goodbye. I think a lot of people do that in their own current lives when things aren't going wrong or whatever. They'll just, sadly so, just abandon it and just pick up and try to find a better life or one they enjoy more. So yeah, those are some deeper levels there.
It's just not critiquing modernity, so I have to dock it.
What?
It's not critiquing modernity, so I have to dock it.
Okay, you hipster. No, like honestly, that was a deep enough like message for me where I was like, man, yeah, they took it to, and they elevated it and gave it like a bigger message behind the backdrop of this crazy multiverse universe.
But yeah, I'm giving it a 10 out of 10, and that's so far in episode 25. That's a really hard feat, right? It's
only two films. Yeah. So this, I really like the use of the timed cuts that were signified for different. Everything in this film was done for a purpose. I was like looking back, I was like, now I can't figure out all of what those purposes are because there's some scenes that are left for your interpretation, but you could tell that they were carefully crafted. I like the authenticity in terms of giving, like, you could tell it was just like sort of naturally free flowing, just not really scripted conversation, but it was still kind of guided. I thought the cast did a tremendous job in this. Their chemistry was just very good on screen. It was believable, even when they were like, especially, and I'll give them credit because that must have been tough having to play, like, show different emotions because you're playing the same person just from different realities. So that, like, as an actor, must have been insanely hard to do. I can't even imagine. I'm not an actor. It's just you see them prep, like a lot of different actors will prep for this specific role, but like imagine doing that, but preparing for this specific role that might have slight differences depending on what reality they're from. It was just mind blowing to me. So because of all of that, a lot of the nuance, man, yeah, it's one of the best science fiction films I think I've ever seen. It's a 10 out of 10 for me as well.
Yeah, it's really good. Like, it's a shame that it's not more well known, but I kind of understand it because it didn't have the media push, it didn't have the the money behind it, and
no big name director,
and no big name director or actors, right? Because they sometimes can give you that extra publicity, PR. So that explains why. But I really can tell that, like, every now and then, like every 5 years, it resurfaces because people find this film that are new and they're like, oh, how come nobody's talking about it? And they reignite old forums and stuff because it's one of those films that it is very unique. That's why I do give it a lot of credit. It's unique and also it's bold. Like I said earlier, it's a good, really good film, and it's a very fantastic experience. Like, even though it was a psychological thriller, I didn't ever feel like kind of like like creeped out or anything. It just felt like a really,
I think that's
engaging watch. Engaging watch.
It was engaging, but there was a bit of horror in terms of the existentialism within it.
Yes, but you know what I mean? Like other psychological theories, they try to get you with like the
stupid scare tactics. No, this was not that. It's more the existential dread of the scenario that they're in. Yeah, that's where it gets you.
Yes, but yeah, I'll leave it at that.
So for me, this is like 1 and 2 alongside with Burning. I mean, they're kind of lock and step. I think Burning might slightly be ahead on that. But for what this film was doing and like what it was attempting to do, it wasn't attempting to be like a super big critique like Burning was of sort of contemporary culture in South Korea specifically. With this film, it was trying to give you a like sort of pose for you a the scenario that they're in, and it did so extremely well.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think I'll leave it at that. I don't know if there's anything else you'd like to add.
No, I'm good. Said my piece.
Well, yeah, there you heard it. This is only the second film that we've both reviewed that we've both given a 10 out of 10, and so that's 2 out of 25 films so far. So who knows how many 10 out of 10 we're going to be given in the future. By this trend, it's not going to be too many. But yeah, if you liked our commentary on this film, Coherence, please like and subscribe to our channel and continue to stay tuned for our future reviews.